I stand alone in the bridal suite on the vineyard, and the air here, saturated with the scent of ripe muscat and late-blooming roses, seems frozen between inhalation and exhalation. The large mirror opposite reflects a woman I ought to recognize, but there is something new in her, something foreign, in the smooth curve of her shoulders, in the impeccably styled hair, in the perfect whiteness of the silk clinging to her body, as if the dress were sewn not from fabric, but from promises. Every seam is in place, every crystal glimmers in the semi-darkness, as if trying to convince me that everything is exactly as it should be. The makeup artist surpassed herself. My eyes seem wider, my gaze deeper than I remember, my cheekbones as if carved from marble, and my lips have acquired a shade of pink, which, she said, was called Eternal Bride. On the dressing table next to the powder compact and the phone lies a bouquet of white roses, the very ones I chose myself from among hundreds of stems, hoping their freshness would not fade by the end of the evening. I am waiting. I check my phone. For the 14th time in 20 minutes, maybe the 15th, I've lost count. No messages from Mom, from Dad, not even a short good luck from Nestor. The screen remains black, like a trace of an absence. And then, a quiet knock on the door, barely audible over the distant music. Martha, the wedding planner, appears in the doorway, her perfect polish to a shine smile taut as a string, and only her eyes betray anxiety. "It's time, Deborah. Are you ready?" I shift my gaze to the window where 90 guests are already gathered behind the glass. White chairs stand in neat rows on the lawn, and sunlight streams between them, refracted in champagne flutes. A string quartet is playing something quiet, as if afraid to disturb the anticipation, but my gaze stops not on the musicians or the altar, but on the first row, where 3 empty seats gape, where Mom, Dad, and my brother were supposed to sit. "They're not coming, are they?" I ask, though my voice sounds weaker than I'd like. Martha doesn't answer immediately. Her smile fades like a candle in the wind. "There's still time," she finally says, but we both understand there is no time left. I take a deep breath, smooth the silk over my hips as if it could give me confidence, and nod. It's time. When the doors to the garden open, the noise subsides, as if someone has covered the entire area with a transparent dome of silence. 90 heads turn, and I feel these gazes on my skin, soft, sympathetic, cautious, as if everyone is afraid to make an unnecessary move, not to disrupt the fragile balance between pity and admiration. Someone whispers, someone looks with a smile, but even the kindest faces only amplify the emptiness inside me. Ahead is David. He stands at the altar and his eyes seek only mine. There is so much warmth in his gaze that for a moment I feel everything else ceases to exist. Almost. Because behind me, my mother's voice from 3 days ago rises like an echo. "We'll try, dear. But Nestor has an event this weekend, you understand." The tone was light, polite, almost apologetic, as if it weren't about a daughter's wedding but some unfortunate scheduling conflict. I offered to pay for the flight, the hotel, everything, just to have them nearby. In response, a short noise in the receiver, then my father's voice, muffled, tired. "Tell her we're busy right now." Now every step I take is an effort. Inhale, exhale, step, another step. Don't cry. Don't give them that victory, even in their absence. When I reach David, he takes my hands. His fingers are warm, firm, alive, and in this touch is everything I've been searching for so long: recognition, support, belonging. "I'm here," he whispers barely audibly, and for a moment that is indeed enough. I am 8 again. I'm standing in the living room where Mom and Dad are fussing over Nestor's new trophy, a debate club cup. They place it on the mantelpiece, step back, assess it, take pictures. I'm holding my certificate for participating in an art contest, the first in my life. The teacher said I had talent, that my lines were honest. I hand the sheet to Mom, and she, without even looking properly, says, "How nice, dear," and returns to her pots and pans. In the evening, Dad pats my head, absently in passing. Nestor needs support. He can achieve great things. I didn't understand then why great things always belonged to someone else, why they sat in the front rows at all his performances but didn't come to my exhibition. You understand, Deborah. He's focused on what's important, Dad said. Since then, I've tried to be important all my life, studied better than anyone, worked longer, strived higher, as if every achievement of mine could finally make them turn around. Now, this day, this ceremony, my last attempt to be seen. I recite the vows, and with each word my voice grows firmer. I speak of a future where David and I are looking in the same direction. I feel that this is my choice, not for someone else, but for myself. When we are pronounced husband and wife, David's mother embraces me, her hug so warm that I don't immediately realize I'm crying. "Now you're one of us, dear," she says, and something inside me lets go. The photographer asks us to the dance floor. David spins me under the garlands. The light from the lamps trembles on our faces, as if disbelieving that all this is really happening. His cousins join in, the music grows louder, we laugh, whirl in a circle of light, and for a few moments I forget everything. About the emptiness in the first row, about the phone on the table, about the fact that explanations are no longer needed, neither for them nor for me. At the reception, as the evening began to wrap itself in the golden light of lanterns and the clinking of champagne glasses grew less frequent, Sarah, my college roommate, raised her glass, and there was something decisive, almost solemn in her movement, as if she were about to propose a toast not just to us, but to womankind as a whole. "To finding a family that deserves you," she said loudly, with that shade of sincerity that needs no applause but elicits it anyway. The crowd responded with an approving murmur. Some clapped, some laughed, and I suddenly felt those words, simple and direct, hit the very core of my chest, as if Sarah had inadvertently pressed an invisible button that unlocked something inside me that had been locked away for years. I felt I could physically feel the truth of her toast coursing through my veins, scorching, alive, impossible to ignore. All these years, I thought, I had been running in circles, trying to earn the attention of those who never intended to give it. I built myself like a house so that they would finally want to live in it, and only now did I understand. They never even intended to cross the threshold. While laughter and music continued around me, I seized a pause and slipped outside, where the warm evening air smelled of grapes and damp grass. I took out my phone, hoping, for what? I didn't even know. No missed calls, no messages, not even a short, "We're proud of you." The empty screen stared back at me like a mirror reflecting everything that hadn't happened. David found me there, standing by a lantern where the soft light fell on my dress, slightly wrinkled after dancing. He approached quietly, as always, put his arm around my waist, and his palms rested on me confidently, without words of support, because he understood. Words were powerless here. "Today they missed something beautiful," he said, looking not at the phone but straight into me, into the part where the old emptiness still ached. I smiled slowly, with weariness and gratitude. Yes, they missed it, and perhaps I would finally stop regretting it. I looked at David, at the man who never made me fight for attention, never demanded proof of my worth, who simply was. I thought of his mother, who was the first to hug me at the wedding, of the friends who came from across the country to be nearby, of the people for whom I was already enough. I turned off the screen, as if closing a book I'd been reading for too long. "Their choice," I said calmly, and in that moment, for the first time in many years, I felt truly light. Not my burden. Let them carry their own. And for the first time, I almost believed it. 2 years passed. I was sitting in my office, leaning back in my ergonomic chair, looking at the notification on the screen. Dry numbers, cold letters. But to me, they sounded louder than any toast. Acquisition of Crescent Motion Studio completed. Amount $21 million. 2 years of negotiations, 5 years of work, sleepless nights, rejections, risks, And here it was, confirmation of my reality, measured in an 8-figure number. The office door swung open and my team burst in. 12 people, noisy, excited, alive, with bottles of cheap champagne and plastic cups. "To Deborah!" someone shouted, and everyone joined in. "To the woman who built something from nothing when others couldn't see," added my creative director. And I laughed because for the first time in a long while, I felt not a need for recognition, but pure, simple pleasure from having people around me for whom I was real. We clinked glasses, laughed, and then my phone vibrated. A regular Instagram notification. I wasn't going to look, but I opened it anyway. Nestor. A post about a fundraiser for the private school his twins attend. In the photo, him, Mom, Dad, and Clara, his wife, their daughters in identical plaid uniforms, smiling, radiant. The caption, "The family tradition continues, 3rd generation at Westridge Academy," and our father's hand resting on Nestor's shoulder. I scrolled further. Hawaii, a retirement party for Dad, family dinners. In every picture, they were like from a magazine. Sunny, content, complete. Only I wasn't there. Not in a single one. I gripped the phone, and somewhere inside, something thin but sturdy crunched, like ice that had held on the surface for too long. While the team continued to celebrate, someone slapped me on the shoulder. "We lost you for a minute." I looked up, smiled, just checking messages. Where were we? And everything swirled around again. Laughter, music, shouts of, "To success," while I mentally calculated how much their perfect life cost. Private school, $30,000 a year. Vacation in Maui, at least $5,000 a week. A house in that neighborhood, no less than $2 million. My brother is successful, but not that successful. Their lifestyle is sustained by our parents' savings, their life paid for by the retirement fund that could have been their peace, but became his showcase. And meanwhile, not a word about me, not a call, not a congratulations. When everyone had left, I remained in the silence, opened my parents' pages, hundreds of posts, all about Nestor, about the granddaughters, about our pride. My life reduced to one boring, happy birthday Deborah from last year. No photo, no voice. I closed the laptop and a strange feeling rose in me. Not anger, no, but resolve. I called my financial advisor. "Porsche tan metallic gray," I said. "I want to finalize it today." 3 hours later, I was signing the papers. $135,000. Madness, luxury, a whim, but exactly what I needed. Not out of revenge, not to prove a point, for the pleasure of being myself. When I returned home, the sun was already setting, and its rays played on the car's metallic body, turning it into a living mirror. I took one picture. The driveway, me, and the reflection of the sky on the smooth hood, posted it. The caption, short, dry, dreams come true. And for 3 days, nothing. And then, on a perfectly ordinary Wednesday, as the day dragged on between meetings and short emails, my phone suddenly lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 5 years. Mom is calling, as if an invisible hand had dropped a cold stone into my stomach. I felt everything inside clench. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, as if checking if it was a mistake, but the name didn't disappear. I answered. "Hello, Deborah." Mom's voice sounded unusually even, without the usual false warmth. It had that particular, authoritative tension with which she usually announced family crises. "We need to talk. There's a family meeting tomorrow." I involuntarily smirked, though the laugh was empty, joyless. "A family meeting? After 5 years of silence, you called to invite me to a council?" My voice held disbelief mixed with something bitter, long suffered. "It's important," she replied, and in that phrase there was a pause, as always when she was deciding whether to tell the truth. In the background, I heard my father's voice, sharp, tired. "Tell her it's important." He still spoke about me in the third person, as if I were still standing in the next room, not hearing, not present. "What exactly is important?" I asked quietly. suppressing a tremble. My wedding wasn't important. My company, my successes weren't either. What has suddenly become so significant now? My mother's voice became tense, taut as a string. It's complicated. Financial difficulties. We need to gather as a family and discuss it. Of course. I felt weariness and sarcasm mix in a single sigh. They saw the car, they knew about the deal, and now I was part of the family again, because there was something to gain. Fine. Tomorrow at 2, I said and hung up. The next morning I got into my Porsche, feeling the cool smoothness of the leather seat envelop my back, as if the car itself was trying to give me confidence. The drive to my childhood home took 40 minutes, just enough time to remember all the forgotten birthdays, all the evenings I spent alone while they gathered together, and all the achievements they never had time to hear about. When I turned onto the familiar circular driveway, time seemed to stop. My metallic gray Porsche gleamed against the white columns of the colonial facade, and the contrast was almost symbolic. Past and present stood facing each other. For a while, I sat inside, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The last time I was here was 6 years ago, the day I came to announce my engagement to David. Mom had nodded with perfunctory politeness, and Dad kept glancing at his watch as if every word of mine was taking up someone else's time. Back then, they didn't need me or my joy. Why was everything different now? My phone vibrated, a message from David. "Remember who you are. Call if you need an evacuation." I smiled involuntarily. His words were a lifeline. Immediately after, a new notification popped up. An email from Bianca Morrow, the investor who had once believed in me when no one else did. "Your value is invisible to those who don't know how to look," she wrote. Another message, from my assistant, a reminder of tomorrow's meetings and a production review at 4. "Don't let them take up too much of your time," the note said. I took a deep breath, recalling my therapist's words from the last session. Boundaries are not a punishment. They are protection. And I decided that this time, I would let them hit my boundaries. I got out of the car, straightened up, squared my shoulders, and walked towards the door. But before I could knock, the door swung open, and Mom and Dad appeared on the threshold. Their faces first showed mild irritation, as if I had come at an inconvenient time, and then shock when their eyes fell on the Porsche behind me. "You've done well for yourself," my father said. Not hello, not we missed you. Just a dry acknowledgement of my financial status. "Yes," I replied curtly. No smile, no attempts to smooth things over. They led me to the dining room, the very one that once smelled of pies and oranges, but now smelled of expensive coffee and alienation. Nestor and Clara were already seated at the table. He looked tired, with a distracted but still self-assured expression. She, perfectly put together, though new wrinkles of anxiety lined her forehead. "Deborah," Nestor said, nodding as if we'd seen each other last week, not half a decade ago. "Let's get down to business," my father interjected, taking some papers out of a folder, neatly stacked as if for a report. I remained standing. My purse in my hands felt like the only thing holding me back from exploding. "No," I said calmly but firmly. "First, I want to understand why I've suddenly become important enough to attend a family meeting when you've managed without my participation in everything else all these years." Mom and Dad exchanged a glance, like people accustomed to acting in tandem, but who had lost the rhythm. Nestor shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. "We can discuss that later," Mom said with that dismissive tone I'd known since childhood. "We have more pressing matters now." "I'm in no hurry," I replied, still standing, "and I don't want to be a family member only when you need something." For the first time in my adult life, an expression of bewilderment flickered across my father's face. In that second, I understood. They really did need my participation. But now I decide what form it takes. The room seemed smaller than I remembered, and colder. Dad presided at the head of the table, hands folded like a board chairman. Clara sat upright with a perfectly straight back, but her eyes darted around like someone afraid to hear confirmation of what they already know. Across from me, Nestor, slouched in a wrinkled designer shirt, diligently avoided my gaze. On his lap lay a leather photo album, a strange detail that seemed almost offensively out of place here. "It's foreclosure, Deborah," my father finally said, trying to sound calm, but his voice trembled. "Nestor's mortgage is in default. The girl's private school tuition is unpaid." He fell silent as if expecting a reaction, but I remained silent, letting the silence stretch, fill with heavy air, turn into a mirror in which each of them had to see themselves. 2 years of complete silence. 2 years where not just a pause but an abyss of mutual indifference gaped between us. And suddenly, according to my mother, this lack of connection had somehow brought us closer. I looked at her, disbelieving that she had seriously said that, then shifted my gaze to my father, who with cold thoroughness placed a thick folder of documents on the polished oak table in front of me. "You need to help your brother," he said so calmly, as if it weren't about imposing a debt on me, but just a formality a decent daughter should fulfill without asking unnecessary questions. When I leaned over and saw that the documents were already filled out, with signatures and numbers, dates and calculations, my breath caught for a moment. In that certainty that my consent was implied, there was something humiliating, almost insulting. "Think of your nieces," Clara interjected, her voice trembling at the very point where I would have previously rushed to help, to fix, to ease, to support. "They're just children, Deborah," she said, lowering her eyes. "They shouldn't suffer because of adult difficulties." Her intonations were rehearsed, as if she'd practiced them in front of a mirror, and for a moment I saw the old Clara before me, manipulative, soft, with a hint of pity, always getting her way. Nestor, sitting beside her, leaned forward, squinting as if preparing to deliver a precise blow. "We're family," he said with feigned warmth, "and family means helping each other. When one of us succeeds, they pull the others up." Clara slid the album towards me, leather, old, familiar. Opened it to a page with photos, smiling children, laughter, candles, gifts. I didn't recognize them immediately, my nieces, at a celebration I hadn't attended. "They ask about you all the time," she said, running her finger over the picture. "See, Martha keeps asking why Aunt Deborah doesn't come, why she doesn't call." I silently looked at these photos, feeling the old, but now dulled, pain rise inside. The pain of being a stranger in a life from which you were once erased. My father cleared his throat with the same businesslike gesture he used to open meetings. "We've done everything we could," he said, avoiding direct eye contact. "Our retirement fund." He trailed off, exchanging a glance with Clara. "We support them as best we can." A hint hung in the air, heavy, sticky. My success was their salvation. My independence was selfishness. I closed the album, pushed it back towards her, feeling something crystallize inside me into an icy calm. "Where were you at my wedding?" I asked, and even I was surprised at the evenness of my voice. Nestor blinked as if he hadn't heard. "What?" he asked. "My wedding. 2 years ago. Where were you?" Clara's hand flew to her throat as if she'd swallowed something too hot. We were busy. Nestor had an event, an important meeting. It was impossible to cancel," she mumbled. "It was inconvenient," my father added, as if justifying an absence at a boring reception. I nodded, feeling everything inside arrange itself into something solid and unchangeable. "And so you're here because you saw the Porsche on Instagram," I said calmly. "You decided to call because you realized I can help." Nestor flushed like a boy caught in a lie. "That's not fair," he retorted. "Not everything is measured in money." I straightened up, feeling a steely confidence in my spine that hadn't been there before. Where doubt once resided, strength now lived. "I built everything alone," I said. "Every scholarship, every client, every sleepless night. Where were you? My father narrowed his eyes, his tone turning cold, managerial. "What does that have to do with what's happening now?" he asked, as if I'd strayed from the point. "Everything," I replied, folding my hands on the table, mirroring his posture exactly. "I'm listening. Explain why I should write a check." Nestor slammed his palm on the table sharply, as if the impact could restore his control. "You always turn everything into drama. Always have to prove how smart and special you are. We're just living normal lives. Not everyone can be a genius." My father put a hand on his shoulder, as if protecting him. "Your brother had potential," he said with emphasized calm, "and we had to help him develop it. You were always too independent." Clara sniffled. "We're still your parents," she whispered, clutching a napkin. I looked at her, for the first time without anger, just with weariness. "Yes," I said quietly. "You're the only ones who had that right." My voice remained even, and even I was surprised by my own steadiness. "You miss my graduation. You miss my scholarship award. You miss my company launch. You miss my wedding." I tapped the table with each statement. "You missed my life, and now you want to share what grew out of that life." My father flinched as if slapped. "Deborah," he began, but I interrupted. "You didn't create this success, and you can't lay claim to it." My phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from David. "You okay? The meeting is suspiciously long." His name on the screen brought back Bianca Morrow's words from the investment day. "Don't seek approval from those who can't see your light." I thought of my team at Crescent Motion, the people who chose me, believed in me, supported me, of the contract in the portfolio signed last week, of those who entrusted me not just with money, but with a dream. My father pushed the folder with the documents towards me. "We're asking for a little," he said with pressure. "Family should help family. The interest rate is quite reasonable," Clara added, as if offering a good deal. Nestor smirked, regaining his habitual smugness. "Blood is thicker than water," he tossed out. I stood up, slowly, almost ceremoniously. The movement made all three of them freeze. Their eyes followed me as if I were the center of gravity in the room. I took my briefcase, placed it on the table, the soft thud cutting through the air. "I've made a different decision," I said calmly. Nestor tensed, watching my hands. My father leaned forward. Clara gripped the napkin so hard her knuckles turned white. Instead of a checkbook, I take out a single document from my briefcase and place it on the table, positioning it precisely in the center between us, as if drawing an invisible line that none of those present will be able to cross again. The paper is thick, cream-colored, with an embossed crest and my name at the bottom, and as I smooth it with my fingertips, the air in the room changes, becomes heavier, denser, saturated with what they are not ready to hear. This is the announcement of the establishment of the Rivera Media Scholarship Foundation, $16 million aimed at paving the way for young women in the world of digital media arts. I say this calmly, clearly, and each word falls onto the table like a stone into water. Nestor repeats the figure, stammering as if he doesn't believe he heard correctly. 16 million. His voice trembles with a mixture of envy, bewilderment, and fear. I allow a slight smile. "Named after Ms. Rivera," I continue, "my high school media arts teacher. She came to my exhibitions in those years when my family was too busy to show up." I don't look up, but I feel my mother tense, and my father press his lips into a thin line. "The funds have already been transferred to the trust, legally protected. The Foundation's Board of Directors approved the program last week. The press release goes out tomorrow morning." Silence falls heavily on the room, like a concrete slab. I hear the wood creak under the table, the napkins crunch under Clara's nervous fingers. "I've decided to help those girls who didn't get the applause," I finally say, rising and gathering my things. "Those who were overlooked, as I once was. That is what family means to me." Nestor's face contorts, veins bulge on his forehead, his eyes gleam. You're spending millions on strangers, he almost shouts, his voice cracking, on unknown girls who mean nothing, on some insignificant girls who deserve it more than I do? I close my briefcase. The latch clicks like a gunshot. On girls who need someone to see them, I say slowly, to believe in them, to invest in their future. On those who I once was. My parents sit motionless, looking at the paper that represents not just numbers, but a whole life that has become unattainable for them. They look at these lines, at my signature, as at a door slammed in their faces. I take out my phone and turn the screen towards them. Just so you know, I say calmly, I've been recording this conversation. The screen shows an active timer, from 36 to 14 minutes and counting. And I've also saved all your messages from today. Every manipulation, every threat, every guilt trip. This is in case anyone gets inventive and files a lawsuit against the foundation. I turn towards the door, my heels echoing softly in the hollow silence of the room. Behind me, a chair scrapes, and Nestor's voice, now raised to a shout, pierces the air. "You can't just leave!" His voice cracks, filled with desperation, an inability to let go. "We need that money." I stop on the threshold without turning around. "No, Nestor," I say quietly but distinctly. "You needed to show up. At my graduation, at my company opening, at my wedding." I place my palm on the door handle. But that opportunity is long gone. The door closes behind me with a soft click, and that sound isn't just the end of a conversation, it's the sound of liberation. The Porsche purrs softly beneath me as I drive out of the yard. My hands rest calmly on the wheel, knuckles no longer white, breathing even. The farther I drive, the freer my chest feels, the easier it is to breathe. I press the call button on the dashboard. "Done," I say, when David answers. "They showed themselves for who they are." "A 3?" he asks, referring to the scale we jokingly invented to measure the severity of family disasters. "How bad was it?" His voice is filled with concern, but also a softness in which I always found peace. "Exactly as we expected," I reply, smiling. "Nestor lost it when he saw the documents. Dad tried to play peacemaker, Mom. Mom was back on family duty. Are you okay?" he asks. I catch my reflection in the rearview mirror. There are no tears, no weariness, not even a shadow of doubt. Just me, a woman who has finally stopped seeking approval. "I'm more than okay," I reply. For the first time, I see them clearly, without expectations. "I'm proud of you," David says quietly. I smile. "Remember," he adds, "the foundation board meeting is at 9 tomorrow. Everything is ready for the press release. The timing is deliberate. The legal establishment of the foundation has to happen before they can, well, regroup. No emotions, just a structure that can't be challenged. The Rivera Media Scholarship is your legacy, not a continuation of the family drama." "I'll be ready," I promise before ending the call. At 23:47, the first message arrives. By midnight, the phone vibrates incessantly, one after another, notifications about family emergencies, urgency, guilt. I mute it and place it screen down. The house is quiet. David breathes evenly beside me. I don't need to read them to know the content, from pleas to accusations, from threats to pity. In the morning, 6 voicemails from my mother. Her voice wavers between tearful tenderness and icy fury, between promises that everything can be fixed and jabs about what people will think of a daughter who abandoned her family. I look in the mirror, applying mascara, and say under my breath, "You've been through worse." The ritual of morning preparation restores my footing. My dark blue suit, the one I wore when signing the company acquisition papers, hangs on the closet door, a symbol of business armor in which I feel unshakable. David hands me coffee in my favorite mug. "Nestor already called his partners," he says, looking at his phone screen. "And your father tried to reach my uncle." I smirk. Predictable. The coffee is bitter, but it's the taste of alertness. "They're acting fast," I add, "but not smartly. The foundation board meeting goes flawlessly. 12 women, all successful, strong, each of whom started from scratch, each knowing the value of support. Decisions are made unanimously, the press release approved. The first scholarship recipient will be selected in 6 months. I'm reviewing venue proposals for the ceremony when Janine from reception calls. Her voice sounds tense. "Ms. Rivers, your family is here." They're causing quite a scene. Through the transparent glass walls of my office, I see 2 security guards in crisp, dark blue suits already heading towards the lobby. Their steps are confident, measured, and I catch myself thinking that their deliberate, restrained pace holds a calmness I so lacked in conversations with my family. I automatically straighten a stack of papers on my desk, a meaningless gesture but necessary to maintain balance. "Keep it calm and professional," I say quietly into the intercom, knowing my words are already heard. Through the large windows, as if through an aquarium, I watch the scene unfold. My mother, in all her theatrical brilliance, with pearl earrings swaying with every sharp movement of her hands, stands in the middle of the lobby, raising her voice to a shout. "My daughter is abandoning her family," rings out over the office hum, causing an awkward echo among visitors and employees. Her voice is the same one that echoed with reproaches and kitchen whispers in my childhood. Next to her, Nestor, arms crossed, and I recognize by the color of his face that particular shade of red that appeared whenever he was denied something. My team looks at me in confusion. Several people are frozen. Someone bites their lip. Someone looks down, pretending to be focused on their monitor. I stand up, smooth my skirt, feel my breath moving beneath the fabric. "It's being handled," I say calmly. "I rehearsed for this moment. Let's get back to work." And that simple, matter-of-fact tone restores order to the room. A few minutes later, security gently but firmly escorts my family to the elevators. Nestor's voice can be heard from the corridor. "This isn't over. We have family obligations that can't be ignored." His words are lost in the hum of the closing doors. I don't move until I hear the elevator descend. In the evening, I write one short, perfectly clear letter to the 3 who called themselves my family. I have documented all your attempts at pressure and interference in the workplace. Any further contact within the office premises will be considered harassment. All personal matters are to be directed through my attorney. Contact details are attached. Signature. Simply, Deborah. When I read it aloud, checking the tone, my voice doesn't tremble. The next day, Patricia, my therapist, leafs through her leather notebook and says, "Direct and clear. And how was it for you to send it?" Her office is filled with soft sunlight, and the air carries the scent of jasmine tea, sweet, almost honeyed. I trace the pattern on the armrest of the chair. "A necessity," I reply, "and no sense of satisfaction." She looks up. "Because you expected a sense of closure?" "Rather, because I expected nothing. It's not about emotions. It's about boundaries." Patricia nods. Her voice remains even. "They simply showed who they always were. People don't change. They just stop hiding when reality presses down on them." I listen silently. "What you see now isn't new behavior. It's an intensification of the old." And this simple statement suddenly becomes the key. I feel it breaking into meaning inside me. They were always like this. I say quietly, "I wanted their love, and they wanted my resources. They are not the same thing." Patricia says nothing, just nods. An understanding settles inside me, heavy but liberating. All these years I sought warmth where I should have sought respect. I tried to earn what should have been unconditional. "It's not my job to earn their love," I say. "It's their job to give it." The words sound almost foreign, but the truth in them pulses like a new breath. The next morning at breakfast, David hands me his phone. On the screen, a notification. Portland Chronicle. Family dispute over Crescent Motion. Scholarship fund. I barely touch the screen and read. Nestor gave an interview. He probably thought he could portray me as cold and ungrateful, but the reporter was smarter than he assumed and asked a question that flipped the script. Why was none of you present at your sister's wedding? The story, printed that same day, became the mirror they so feared. It contained words about parents who were absent when their daughter needed them and appeared only when numbers started being mentioned. A storm erupts on social media. My mother, in her usual manner, posts long messages, full of resentment, reproaches, and hints at ungrateful children. But this time, the tide turns against her. People I barely remember write me words of support. Classmates, former colleagues, even distant cousins we haven't spoken to in decades. We always wondered why they never talked about your successes, my cousin Michael writes to me. My father's attempts to contact my investors fail. They politely but firmly refuse to discuss personal matters, and one of them even forwards me a recording of the conversation where my father tries to appeal to family values. Instead, contrary to their expectations, the community rallies around the foundation. Applications pour in, long before the official start. A week later, Portland Business Journal requests an interview. I agree, but immediately set the boundaries. Only about the foundation, its purpose and impact. No family comments. The reporter, Delia Warren, comes to our temporary office, bright, with a view of the river. Her eyes are attentive, her voice soft. "This is an impressive initiative," she says, flipping through a brochure. 16 million, a solid start. What prompted this decision? I consider the answer before saying, I had a teacher, Ms. Rivera. She alone saw potential in me when others turned away. She changed my life with her attention. I want to do the same, for girls who are not seen. You've built a brilliant career, Delia says. The Crescent Motion acquisition was one of the standout events last year. Your family must be proud of you? The question hangs in the air, and I feel the room momentarily freeze. I could evade it, as I used to, but I don't want to. I look her straight in the eyes. My success was achieved without family support, I say. They weren't there when I received my scholarship, when I started my company, when I got married. Her pen stops. That creates a special context for the Foundation's mission, she says quietly. A few days later, the article appears under the headline, Self-Made Success Becomes a Legacy of Support. And for the first time in my life, I feel neither fear nor guilt, only peace, even steady, like the light of a new morning. When, a few days later, news of Nestor's house foreclosure appeared, I looked at the laptop screen with such calm, as if it were happening in another universe, having nothing to do with me. The community, attentive and observant, quickly connected all the dots, and paradoxically, I didn't even have to say a word. Everything had already been said by their actions, their shouts, their humiliating attempts to blame me for their own failures. David took control of all security matters, enhancing protocols and restricting access to the house, even for couriers, and I allowed myself the luxury of silence, that rare and precious silence where you no longer need to justify yourself. My business team worked cohesively, like a well-oiled machine, filtering incoming messages, sifting out the unnecessary, building a new communication strategy with no room for panic or chaos. Bianca Morrow, my first investor, mentor, and perhaps the only person who once saw in me not a tool but a person, released a brief but strong statement about supporting my mission to help people grow, not sustain their dependency. Her words shaped the public perception of this whole story. Not vindictiveness, but a mature desire to rebuild a system that was initially warped. My college friends became the ones who filled the gaps between work meetings and long evenings. They organized dinners, invited me to theater premieres and intimate concerts, as if trying to return to me the simple joy of being present in a life where there was no longer room for family dramas. Patricia remained the quiet center of my inner world. Every week her office was filled with light, the scent of jasmine, and that calmness I increasingly felt as home. Over time, I understood that this new circle was my true front, my chosen clan, not by blood but by consent, by intention, by mutual support. 2 weeks after that memorable confrontation, I stood on a podium, receiving a business leadership award from the Women in Media Alliance. Before me sat hundreds of women, smart, strong, kind, sincerely celebrating my success. In that moment, I realized that everything had truly changed. I no longer belonged to that old, tattered fabric where love was conditional and recognition a rare handout. My parents, once proud of their status, now lived in limbo. Their plans for a serene retirement shattered along with the illusion of well-being. My mother's social standing in her country club, where she once shone with pearl earrings and phrases about a daughter making a career in tech, was now utterly undermined. Nestor's twins, deprived of private school, would transfer to a public one, and I felt no schadenfreude, only a quiet acknowledgement of justice. Meanwhile, the foundation grew, taking shape and breath. Articles about it appeared far beyond Portland, and each piece resonated with light, meaning, something more than just charity. This story became a response to pain, not a cry of vengeance, but an attempt to turn vulnerability into strength. When the committee presented the 3 finalists for the first scholarship, I felt a tremor, the kind that comes when a circle truly closes. The girl from the first file wrote about her teacher, the only person who noticed her when others turned away. I read her words and saw myself, young, unsure, but ready to move forward. Healing through action, not through regret, I thought, signing the documents. Family is defined not by lineage but by actions, not by promises but by how they are kept. And perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, not as a source of resources, not as a symbol of success, but as a woman capable of enduring and remaining herself. A few weeks passed. A new voicemail appeared on my phone from Aunt Meredith, the 4th in a row, and I deleted it without finishing, barely hearing the trembling words, "Everyone misses you." In the mailbox lay a Thanksgiving invitation printed on cream paper with the inscription, "Family should be together." Such a transparent attempt at manipulation that I only smiled bitterly. Then a message came from Cousin Drew, polite, bewildered. "I don't understand the reason for the disagreement between you and Uncle Dad. Can't you just talk?" Of course he didn't understand. He wasn't standing beside me when no one was at my wedding. He hadn't seen the 20 years lived in invisibility. Yesterday a letter arrived from Mom, that elegant, confident handwriting I could recognize even in the dark. "We always believed in you," she wrote, as if trying to rewrite the history of our existence with a few words. The envelope was half burnt in the fireplace, its edges blackened like the lies it was saturated with. Dad called the office last week, demanding to clarify the situation, and his voice held not a shadow of realization. My assistant, as instructed, informed him I was temporarily unavailable. The last straw was when Nestor sent the twins to my office with handmade cards. "We miss Aunt Deborah," read the childish handwriting, too neat to be theirs. I felt physically nauseated. It was so obviously fabricated that even pity gave way to weariness. David silently watched me examine the cards on the kitchen table. "They're desperate," he said quietly. I nodded. Yes, desperate. But not from love, from a loss of control. The phone rang again. The family lawyer spoke in an even, measured tone, as if reading an instruction. "Deborah, moral obligations must be considered. Family ties imply responsibility." I knew this subtext. In their story, I am the villain, the heartless daughter who abandoned her impoverished family. Then came Pastor Wilson's voice, soft, benevolent, but with the same note of reproach. "Your parents are deeply concerned. Perhaps you could meet and talk about reconciliation?" The next day, messages came from 2 old childhood friends, ones I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. "Your parents are heartbroken," one wrote. "Holidays are for forgiveness," added the other. And then, a letter from Clara with photos of the twins in Halloween costumes and the caption, "They ask about you all the time." I barely restrained myself from throwing the phone across the room. "They're framing the whole situation as my responsibility," I said to Patricia in our session, feeling anger vibrating dully in my chest. My forgiveness, my duty, my obligation to be the bigger person. "And how do you feel?" she asked calmly, not looking away. I sighed. I'm angry, but at the same time, I feel guilty. Because I know they wouldn't fight so fiercely if they weren't afraid of one thing: losing control. The Foundation's Board of Trustees meeting, which was initially supposed to be a mere formality, suddenly turned into an unexpectedly emotionally challenging task. The committee unanimously recommended awarding the first scholarship to Adelina Talati, a 17-year-old girl whose short film, submitted with her application, captured everyone's attention from the first frames. I watched the screen and caught my breath faltering. Her camera sees pain the way I once tried to hide it. That play of light and shadow, that barely perceptible tremor in her voice. She was almost me, just 17 years earlier. That evening, at home, I sat in the semi-darkness of the living room and without turning on the main light, played the video again. David settled on the couch beside me, waited silently for me to speak. On Adelina's face, a weariness not typical for her age, familiar to the point of pain, the same one frozen in my wedding photos where the smile was more like a mask. She talked about finding her voice in film when her family stubbornly refused to hear her real words. And before I could stop myself, the question burst out: what if I was wrong to cut them off completely? David turned to me, his gaze soft but precise. "What made you think that?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "Adelina, if I'm teaching these girls to be strong, to find their own path, am I not just running away from my own family? Maybe boundaries are just another way of running." "No," he replied calmly. "Boundaries aren't a refusal. They are a form of self-love." I nodded, feeling something shift inside. "And what would I tell Adelina if her family treated her the way mine treated me?" I asked. The answer came without hesitation. I would tell her she deserves people who see her value, not demand proof of it. On Thursday, the day before Thanksgiving, I hosted a dinner at our house. The long oak table was extended to accommodate everyone. David sat beside me. Across was Bianca, next to her members of my team, smiling like old friends. At the other end, Adelina, timid, dazzled by the attention, her eyes shining. On the sideboard behind her stood her certificate in a frame, the first in the Foundation's history. Our house was filled with a warmth I never knew in childhood. Candle flames flickered in silver holders. Laughter rose to the ceiling. Voices intertwined easily, without tension, without the need to earn love. Here, no one had to prove they deserved to be heard. I raised my glass. To those who see us for who we are. That toast seemed to spread across the table like a wave of light. My phone was off, notifications disabled. Time flowed at its own pace, as if no other worlds existed outside the windows. Conversations flowed freely, without poisonous subtexts or the biting remarks I grew up with. Over dessert, I stood up and announced the Foundation's new program, Mentorship for Scholarship Recipients. I explained that I would work with each of them personally, helping not just with funds, but with presence, advice, experience. "We're creating connections that matter," I said. Adelina's eyes widened. "You yourself will be our mentor?" she asked quietly. I smiled. "Every step of the way," I replied. "The Foundation isn't just money," I added. "It's a way to create meaning." Bianca, sitting across, nodded with satisfaction. "You've created a structure that can't be interfered with," she said, and I felt that was exactly what I wanted to achieve. The Foundation's independence was legally secured, and now I could say confidently, the success of our endeavor would be measured not by others' approval, but by the real impact on the lives of those who believed in us. Later, as we cleared the table, David turned on the news. A report about the Foundation was airing, perfectly timed, coinciding with my parents' traditional family dinner time. I saw myself on screen, calm, confident, not defensive, but affirming. "We build family through actions, not through obligations," I said in the interview. The anchor smoothly transitioned to a financial segment, comparing the foundation's transparent management with examples of failures and inefficiency, among them an obvious, though subtly veiled, mention of Nestor's company. I noticed Adelina, standing nearby, press her hand to her lips. "They really compared your brother's business to your foundation," she whispered. "The facts speak for themselves," I replied calmly, arranging dessert plates. The community had finally seen what my family so stubbornly refused to notice. The next morning I received a message. My parents wanted to meet. A coffee shop in the city center, neutral territory. I arrived in my Porsche. The irony that this car, a symbol of independence, had now sparked their renewed interest. Dad sat at a table, hunched, aged, with wrinkles etched at the corners of his mouth. His hands trembled. "We should have been there," he said after a long pause. "At the wedding?" I asked, though I knew he meant something more. "Everywhere," he whispered. "All those years." Mom sat beside him, looking at me with moist eyes. "How can we fix this?" Her voice quavered, and the question hung in the air like a prayer believed too late. 3 months ago, I might have thrown myself into that window of hope, but now there was only quiet understanding inside. "Some things can't be fixed," I said. "They can only be accepted." Mom flinched. "I'm not closing the door forever," I added, "but I need accountability, not convenience. I will consider the possibility of communication after you both begin therapy." "That's not necessary," my father said hastily, and the old, familiar dismissiveness surfaced in his voice again. I looked at him evenly. "It's not up for discussion." Taking a sip of tea, I felt a calm warmth spread through my chest, turning into confidence. They exchanged glances, the same silent ones they'd used for years to discuss me behind my back. But now, for the first time, something like bewilderment flickered in them. Their world was crumbling. Nestor's financial collapse shattered the illusions of his superiority, and my success was finally beyond their reach. When they rose from the table, no agreements were reached, no apologies uttered, no promises made. I watched them walk slowly to their car, a modest sedan, a far cry from their former luxury, and getting into my car, I didn't look back. With every heartbeat, I felt freedom gradually replacing the sense of duty. The foundation was waiting. Adelina's project needed review, and I knew it was there, in the future, that my home now was. My chosen family was waiting for me for dinner, and for the first time in many years, I felt I was walking not away from something, but towards something, towards people, towards a home, towards a life where I no longer needed to hide, justify, or prove my worth. This, I realized, is the decisive difference that changes everything. That morning, I spent time in the Crescent Foundation studio, where sunlight softly streamed through tall arched windows, laying warm golden patches on the floor and turning everything around into a living painting. I stood by a wall, watching Adelina, no longer the shy girl from our first meeting, confidently adjusting her camera, checking the light, focus, lens movement. Exactly a year had passed since I last saw my parents, and now that memory didn't ache but simply existed somewhere in the back of my mind, like an old photograph I no longer needed to return to. "What do you think of this angle?" Adelina asked, looking up. Her eyes sparkled with the same fire Miss Rivera had once noticed in me years ago. "Try shifting the camera a bit to the left," I said, moving closer. "See how the light falls on the face? It should reveal, not obscure." My voice held a firmness in which I recognized myself, but not the desperate, approval-seeking daughter. A woman standing firmly on the ground, having become for others the mentor she herself had once waited for. On the wall behind Adelina hung photographs, black and white color documentary, frames from the projects of our scholarship recipients, young directors, artists, photographers, who once were afraid to even dream that their stories would be heard. Now they were here, on these walls, each work a testament that a voice once supported never falls silent again, My office in this building replaced that childhood bedroom where I once imagined a different life, a life where I was listened to, not judged. Here, everything was my choice. The chair comfortable for thinking, the lamp giving warm light, the shelves holding awards, without false modesty and without guilt. Not a single inherited item, not a single detail tied to duty or resentment. Everything created anew, like myself. "I finished the final edit," Adelina said suddenly, straightening up. "Do you want to watch it with me?" We went into the editing room, where her footage came to life on the high-resolution screen. The story of 3 generations of women from a small town in Oregon, a story of labor, silence, and survival, told with such love that my chest tightened. I watched, and a wave of pride rose inside me, unlike any I had once sought. This feeling wasn't about me, not about my victories. It was about her, about what she had managed to do. When the final credits rolled, Adelina turned to me and I saw tears on her lashes. "Because of you, I believe I can," she whispered and hugged me tightly, sincerely, without fear. I hugged her back and thought of Ms. Rivera, the woman who once believed in me when my family was silent. Her faith was a bridge across indifference, and now I was passing that flame onward. The cycle continued, but no longer through pain, through support. A few days later, I stood on the stage of the Portland Arts Center, accepting a leadership award. Before me stretched a sea of faces, and I felt not fear, but gratitude. David sat in the front row, his eyes shining, and I understood that today there were no empty chairs, no phantoms I wished to see here. Everything was in its place. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. This journey began almost imperceptibly, but led to where I am meant to be. For many years, I measured my worth by the approval I couldn't earn from those who didn't want to give it. I paused, took a breath, looked at the faces before me. Now I measure it by what we create together. Applause filled the hall, and I felt it pass through me, washing away the old pain, leaving only clarity. My therapist calls it post-traumatic growth, but for me, it's simply peace, the kind that comes when you accept. Not everything heals, but you can live on, not hiding from the scars. I carefully maintain boundaries with my family. Calls are rare, letters polite, meetings short, and that is enough. Holidays now take place in the circle of those I've chosen myself, those who laugh without a shadow of judgment. David and I have our own traditions, simple but real. A month ago, we held a party for Bianca's retirement, and the hall was full of those who had once been there when old ties were breaking. Our new project is an emergency fund for female students caught in financial traps, where talent often perishes under the weight of circumstances. I know what it's like to have a dream but not a single person who would say, "You can do it." Now I say it to others. Unconditional belief in one's own potential. That's what I lacked, and what I now give. Driving home through evening Portland, I passed the very coffee shop where I once edited my first videos on an old rented laptop. Familiar silhouettes flashed by the window. My parents walking slowly, hunched. For a moment, our eyes met. I didn't stop. There was no pain, no anger, just peaceful acknowledgement. They gave me a lesson, albeit a cruel one. They showed me what love is not. And David, my work, my path, taught me what it is. Tomorrow, Adelina begins filming her new movie, and I will be there again, not as a savior, but as an equal, with a camera in my hands, showing her how light can become an ally if you look at it correctly. Family isn't those who raised you. Family is those who help you see yourself as you always were,